All right, kids, there's this thing called I don't want to mispronounce it, a suburb. I need to enunciate, where mental health resources and education are provided and job training is readily available, which helps on the front end by not only preventing crime and criminals, but unnecessary violent encounters with police. More on this in a second. Yesterday, an executive order was issued declaring gun violence in New York as a disaster emergency, the first and only state to do so. What this does and how this helps is yet to be seen. But this reminded me that I made a video featuring New York City's stop and frisk policy, along with the myth that is black on black crime. Here's a quick recap. When looking at the murder rate amongst black people in America and comparing it to that of, say, white people's, you'll see that the rates between the two races are similar. However, black people's is definitely higher. This difference can be due to poverty, and we know this because people, in general, living at or below the federal poverty line are twice as likely to engage in violent crime. Even white people who live in poor urban communities have similar rates of violent crime to poor black people who live in urban areas. The vast majority of homicides in the United States are committed by poor people and or men. Yet this country never created a phrase for poor on poor crime or man on man crime, but coined one for black on black crime. With that said, here in 2021, homicide has increased all over the country in pretty much every major city in the United States. A good portion of it is occurring in poor urban neighborhoods that were already having issues with gun violence in the first place. Now, too many people are blaming this increase in homicides on the movement to prevent crime and criminals by taking money from already bloated police departments and redistributing those funds to social programs to address what comes along with poverty, food insecurity, and housing, for example. This movement to reallocate funds so that the need for police is reduced on the back end is called defunding the police. Hey, Camden, New Jersey disbanded their police department years ago, and it was successful. Look it up on your own time. Today, we're going to talk about defunding the police and a little bit about black on black crime. And since people's go-to argument when losing a debate about police brutality is, what about black on black crime? And they follow that up with, well, look at Chicago. We're going to start with the Windy City. First, these were the cities who pledged to some degree to change or adjust their budget for policing last year. But more than 20 actually did so. And yes, most of these cities have had an increase in homicides too. And as you can see, Chicago is one of them. They cut their police budget by 3% by eliminating vacant positions. Chicago has long been known for its gun violence, amongst other things. But keep in mind that Chicago is densely populated. It is a city that is roughly the size of Columbus, yet has 1.8 million more people. When people talk about the gun violence there, they use total whole numbers instead of rates. That's not by accident, because when looking at the murder rate in America, St. Louis and Baltimore are by far the top two. Chicago's pre-pandemic murder rate was 28th in the country, putting them between the mean streets of Buffalo, New York, and Chattanooga, Thug Chat, Tennessee. So if people are wondering if the unfilled vacant police positions in Chicago is what led to an increase in gun violence, you should know that Chicago's rate of police per capita was second in the country. As you'll see, it's not that more cops necessarily means less crime, nor does more funding mean less crime. Data shows that the raw numbers of police have declined over the past 5 years, and the rate of police officers per 1,000 residents has been dropping for 2 decades. At the same time, the violent crime rate has also dropped. In 1997, the national violent crime rate was at 611. In 2016, the violent crime rate was at 386.3. And even what's occurring in 2021 isn't as bad as it was in 1990. With that said, this past July 4th weekend was deadly in Chicago. Saying it's concerning is an understatement. Fixes, of course, aren't easy, and defunding the police isn't guaranteed to work. But if funding and less police are to blame for a potential 25% increase in homicide in 2021, then what are we saying about the decrease in robberies, property crime, and rape? Are we saying anything at all? With all of this, homicides are up in big cities and small cities, Democrat-led cities and Republican-led cities, cities that increase spending and cities that cut some funding from their police departments. As it turns out, people who are blaming the increase in homicides on defunded police departments are simply lying, just like they do with the black on black crime myth and using arrest data to support it. Need I remind y'all that black people are about 7 times more likely than any other races to be wrongfully convicted of murder? Even so, it takes longer for black people's convictions to be overturned. Oh, and the term black on black crime likely came from Chicago. Once, to prepare for a talk on black on black crime in 1970, a writer spoke with a Chicago neighborhood hustler named Fast Willie and asked him why he robbed and beat up black people who are brothers. In case anyone thinks black people kill each other because we hate each other, this quote is pretty self-explanatory. Fast Willie commits crimes against black people because that's who lives around him, and that's what police will let him get away with. Earlier, I compared Chicago to Columbus because I find any reason to bring up the city that I love. But our police department here in C-Bus hasn't defunded the police, and the rate of homicides has increased since 2019, which was pre-pandemic. For the sake of reference, almost 5 years ago, my brother Jamie was shot and killed. He was the 56th homicide of 2016. That occurred on August 2nd. In 2021, the 56th homicide in Columbus came in the spring. With 26 weeks left this year, we're already at 103. This is devastating. It's hard to gauge how much a police presence prevents crime aimed at civilians because, after all, police officers themselves are victims of violent crime too. I'm not here to bash the police today. I'm here to bash the politicians and media who intentionally misrepresent what defund the police means or abolish the police and police reform for that matter, or want to call it something else so it can be more palatable or marketable for those that don't understand. Google is free. Violent crime in America can best be described as an economic phenomenon. Violence is a symptom of poverty. There is a correlation between the two, but poverty does not necessarily cause violence. And it's no coincidence that homicide, violent crime, and police interactions happen less where there's more resources, like in the suburbs. Among the many possible reasons for the increase in homicides, poverty, a recession mixed with a pandemic, civil, social, and political unrest, a proliferation of guns, the defunding of police departments across cities in America, which isn't happening to the scale at which people say it is or want it to, isn't really one of them. But we're going to be all right.